Hello, consider this an all-in-one primer for Alien RPG. I've got other videos that go into more detail, but this one's just trying to cover everything in a minor way for you. So let's get on with that. Either you're going to be one of my players or another GM has led you here because I've explained it roughly and they're going to run it for you. Let's try and cut through everything. 4 stats: strength, agility, wits, empathy. There are 3 skills connected to each stat. You will have a number in those stats and you will have a number in those skills. The higher the number, the better you are at it. As an example, agility has mobility, so moving quickly, having to do a sort of like a move thing, running away from something, that kind of stuff. Piloting, which is, obviously piloting an aircraft, how good you are. It's the difference between Larry over there and Han Solo. You know which one's going to have the higher piloting skill. And ranged combat, obviously the shoot pewing. So again, Larry and Han Solo. Those stats, basically, you add up. When you have to do a roll, you'll be asked to do something. Let's go to the piloting as an example. You'll be asked, hey, you're steering the craft. It's really, really bad at the moment. You have to do a very particularly difficult maneuver. So we'll actually call upon a piloting test. You would take your agility score, whatever you have in agility. You take your piloting amount as well. You'd add those two together, and then you'd add any other bonuses you're getting from gear or indeed the craft itself that you're driving. So the craft is considered gear for the sake of this. If it was shooting, for instance, you might be using a particular gun that gives like a +1, +2, +3 bonus or whatever. So you'd add that to the amount of base dice. So it's your stat, your skill, and any gear. And you just add it all together as base dice, right? And you roll all those dice. And if you don't generate any 6s, then you failed. Okay, and something tends to be bad about that. There might be a bad result effectively. Now you need 6s to succeed. If you get at least 1 6, you've succeeded in theory. I'll cover. There's still something that could go wrong, but in theory, the more successes you get, the more you succeed. And with extra successes past the first confirmation one, you get to spend them on stunts. Those stunts are listed in the book. There are sheets just containing stunts. You'll have to look them up. But there are extra kind of things. But as a real quick example, a really popular one for like a combat maneuver thing, close combat or ranged combat, being strength or agility respectively, is to just basically use those extra successes to add 1 extra damage per. But you can do other stuff with them, basically. You can, knock someone down with 1 and do other stuff. So those stunts give you kind of like a little bit of flavour and theme to your combat and some options. And all of those skills actually have their own associated stunts. I wouldn't be closed-minded to a player coming up with something and suggesting something as a stunt as well that isn't on the list. Personally speaking, your mileage may vary with your GM. 6s are successes. However, we have the yellow dice as well. This is called the stress dice. Now, you start with no stress, but as things happen in the game, you will gain stress. Sometimes you will just outright gain stress from like witnessing something terrible. It might be, all the party that saw it gains 1 stress. Or there could be certain other in-game effects that you do or happen to you that then give you stress in particular. Now, stress dice, if a 1 comes up on a stress die, then you've failed your roll. So basically, however stressed you are, you roll that many stress dice. Let's just get that out there. So when you do a roll, you add up your stat, your skill, and your gear in base dice. And then you look at how many stressed level you are, and you roll that many stress dice, and you add them all together, and you roll all together. This is why you need 2 different coloured D6s, basically, to differentiate this. Or if you're in Roll20 and there isn't a roll wrap for it, then just roll 1 lot of D6s first, and then roll the other one straight after it. You need to differentiate. So a 1 comes up in that, you failed your roll, and you take a panic test. And a panic test is essentially you roll a d6, you add your current stress to that d6, and the GM checks the table and tells you, whether you're panicking and freaking out yet. So there's a whole psychological element that is kind of like Cthulhu, but played in the one-shot kind of things like this. It's really, really acutely bad and can get bad really, really quickly. So like all the panic, you've got something, an impossible thing trying to kill you and you can't escape. You're going to freak out. You're going to go through psychological phenomena. And this system sort of represents all of that. You're going to have horrible things happen to your character mentally. And you've got to try and control that. But, that's beyond the function of this video, the actual attempts to control that and things you can do about that. Okay, so that makes stress look pretty bad. However, the good side to it is that because it's a die, of course, it's got a 6 on it. So it does technically give you a chance to succeed as well. So the more like hyped up you are, obviously it's your adrenaline as well. So the more chance you've got of succeeding possibly too. So 1s on this one, fine. You can actually see where they've marked these ones. They don't have a special number on their 1. So base dice 1s are fine. And unlike Mutant, you can re-roll those. But stress dice 1s, not so much. They've got a face hugger on. So, yeah. Okay, that's the dice. That's the skills. You're going to get talents and stuff that will affect you as well for your class. Your HP is basically your strength amount, and your HP will just go down, so it's not going to be a lot. Combat is quick and fast and dirty. Initiative is pretty much just like drawing a card, or as I'm doing it on Roll20, I'm just getting everyone to do a D100 and just getting it in like that. Actions. So you get 1 slow action, 1 fast action in a round, or indeed 2 fast actions. Some of you may be familiar with that sort of setup. Your actions are, you can do stuff like, well, with a slow action. I mean, there's a whole list of it, but it's going to be stuff like attacking in hand-to-hand, boarding a vehicle, reloading a firearm is actually a slow action. Shooting in full auto mode, of course, and which in of itself, by the way, shooting in full auto mode gives the player a stress, 1 stress, as does pushing your roll. Let's talk about that quickly, actually, because that does bring me back to the dice. So if you didn't get any 6s, or you want to improve the amount of 6s you had, you can push your roll, which means you re-roll everything that wasn't a 6. And as long as you didn't get one of these 1s come up on the stress dice, you can do that. As soon as you get one of these come up, you fail the roll and you do a panic check, and that's all done. And if you're firing a firearm, indeed, you've run out of ammo or something's happened, basically. Hell, we know what you're stressing about. So you get to like re-roll all those, so for another chance at it. But of course you also re-roll these. So there's a risk, there's a danger, it depends how many stress you've got. The only thing is, inherently doing that, actually choosing to push your roll, means you gain 1 stress from doing it. So even if you didn't have any stress dice, as soon as you then re-roll, you immediately gain 1 of these, or indeed an additional 1 of these to add to that re-roll straight away. Naughty. So slow actions, applying first aid, giving orders with the command skill, really, really important. That's one of those things that you want to control stress with. Look into it. Fast actions can be stuff like shoving someone, making a grapple attack. I mean, there's system summary pages for all this kind of stuff, and that's kind of what I'm looking at the moment. You can block an attack in close combat. That's pretty important. Some of the foes in this RPG are really, really deadly, and they can potentially one-shot you, no matter what your health. And that's dangerous. You hit 0, and basically you get to roll on a nice crit table, and we see what happens. But sometimes they can crit you to death without even taking your health out much. But you can attempt to block an attack. So basically, if in your go in that round, I should say, of combat, if you still have fast actions left, if you haven't used them all, then you can actually use a fast action to block. So technically, if you didn't use any of your goes and you just kind of skipped in, or indeed you haven't sort of gone this round yet, you could use both your fast actions to block and block again. And blocking just lets you do like a counter combat move in some way to attempt to stop that close combat attack from hitting you. And that's the only way really for something like an alien that's about to nom you. So each time you get damaged, for instance, you get stressed. There's lots of that. I mean, that's really bad, isn't it? Things like going without sleep, food, or water. If you perform a coup de grace on someone, you gain a stress. If a scientist in your team fails their analyze roll, consequently, if they succeed in analyze roll, then you will lose a stress. There's things you can do to lose stress. You can rest and recuperate and like take time. But of course, time is something that's also measured in this game in another sense. So when you're not in combat and you're in like exploration / stealth time, you are basically, it works in turns. So you can spend a turn investigating 2 zones. So this is very board gamey, and especially if you're playing it on like a map or something, you can sort of get it then that way. Which playing it in Roll20 or something, it makes sense. So a zone would be, as an example, a corridor or a room. So that would take anywhere between 4 to 8 minutes to take a turn. And in the period of time of a turn, you can explore 2 zones. So in that sense, you can then, that's important for things like supply rolls on, suits with a limited air supply, oxygen, and things like motion trackers with limited battery. And basically you do these supply rolls to check to see if they're not going to run out. And really, really quickly, the way a supply roll works for any of that stuff, food, water, oxygen, battery, is basically you'll have a supply rating. Whatever number it is, you take that many dice, you roll that many dice. Ones on that roll mean you go down by that much in your supply rating. When the last one's gone, you're out. It's as simple as that, really. Kind of scary. And some things will ask you to do it once a day. Some things will ask you to do it every turn, so every couple of rooms. So in that kind of exploration sense, again, you might be on the clock depending on what gear you're using. Scary stuff, on top of everything else. There's loads of other stuff that can give you stress. It's a very, very stressy game in that sense. But of course, the panic rolls, sometimes you can have to do a panic roll just straight out without even getting one of these nasty ones come up on the stress dice. And that can happen, for instance, if you're pinned down by a ranged attack. It can happen if you witness a friendly character suffering from certain other panic things. They can sort of bounce off and it's like, you're freaking out and now you're freaking me out. If you suffer a critical injury, you take a panic. If you get attacked by a strange alien for the first time that you've never ever seen before, you panic straight away. Or something narratively horrific happens. I think that's mostly pretty much it. Just to quickly mention, medical aid allows you to recover from broken state, which means 0 HP. Additional successes restore health at 1 point per success. And taking a turn uninterrupted in a safe area, so 4 to 8 minutes, restores 1 health to unbroken characters and also reduces stress by 1. So you can heal both those things by 1 for every turn you just sit down and do nothing for 4 to 8 minutes for every turn. Of course, the idea is in something like a complex or whatever, that the GM's still able to move pieces around and may have like a time critical elements in play or whatever to make that less obvious to do. But you want to try and do it as wherever you can, because it's the stress that's going to get you before the health. Believe me. Yeah. Just relieve that stress if you can. You also have a signature item that you can use basically to try and reduce one's stress just by instantly interacting with it. So once per session, or indeed per act, actually. Yeah, let's see what else. So weapons, it will just have a bonus, so that'll mean how many of these dice, and it will have a damage, and it will kind of tell you stuff like range. The range bands they work their own way, kind of theatre of the mind. It's not measured in squares like that. It's like engaged range, short range, same zone, a few meters away, medium, adjacent, or up to 25 meters away. You know the kind of thing, long and extreme. And weapons will basically do all of that as well. Let's see, your encumbrance level, the point at which you've got to start sort of doing checks to see if you can keep moving. If you're carrying too much, is basically your strength times 2. I mean, it's going to be tracking stuff like radiation and all that. The other thing I could maybe touch upon is armor, and the way that's going to work. You're going to have an armor amount, and you're going to get to roll that armor amount, and you need to try and roll 6s to basically negate damage that you've just taken. So, you know, hey, you've just taken 4 damage. You might have 2 armor, so you use a couple of these guys, and I've just rolled a 5 there, so that didn't do it. And I've just rolled a 5 again, so that didn't do it. So you didn't negate any of the damage through your armor this time. And armor can get damaged as well, and all of that stuff. Basically, the armor roll doesn't do that, doesn't do this thing, and it doesn't push. It's just really quickly to, you know, negate damage that you've just taken. Yeah, I think that's probably enough for you to go on for a quick primer. And your GM can clarify everything else. Hopefully you'll have a pre-made character, especially if it's a one-shot, then you don't have to worry about even actually rolling that. I hope I've covered everything you're going to roughly need to get an idea how this plays. And until next time, I'll see you at the table, or indeed on the screen.